And welcome back everyone to yet another lesson in web development. Today we are going to continue with our core project, and that is our HR system. And in our previous lesson, we essentially created the structure and the database and all the tables associated with our database or with our HR system. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about loading our persistent data. Now, before we get started, let's have a look at the objectives for today's lesson. Now today we really only have a single objective, and that is to load our persistent data into our database so that eventually we can have the back-end data stack show inside of the front end. But what exactly is persistent data and why is it so important? Now, to better understand the importance of persistent data, I thought it might be a good idea to revisit our dashboard. You'll notice I have 4 employees associated with my company called Joe's Coaches, and then I have several interviews as well. But let's pay particular attention to what happens when I add an employee. So I'll add some random values over here, such as the first name, the last name, and then I'll also add a new role over here, junior software developer. And then I'll add the department, and then maybe something like J Stevens at jcoaches.com. And then we can add in a salary value over here. So let's go with something like 20,000. So the moment I submit this and I confirm, the employee gets added. But once I refresh, that employee disappears. This is the importance of databases and persistent data. If I had to refresh my dashboard, ideally, I would still want that employee's card to show up here. Non-persistent data means that if I refresh the page, the front end basically resets and goes back to its hard-coded values. But the moment I use persistent data from a database, I can maintain that card or any given records associated with my dashboard. So in today's lesson, we are just going to load the data into our database. Wonderful. Now, we want to make sure that we have access to our server. And that is to say, we want to make sure that we have access to PHPMyAdmin. So as per usual, we want to make sure that our XAMPP service is running. And that is to say, we want our Apache server and our MySQL service to be running in the background. So I'll close this off and I'll start working on my PHPAdmin or PHPMyAdmin. And in our previous lesson, we created these 3 tables. But after giving it some thought and after revisiting the dashboard, there's one column we don't have in our employees table. So let's actually open this up, and if we head over to employees, we'll notice we don't have a field for emails. So that's the first thing we are going to do, and that is to add an email column so that when we import our data or bring our data set into our database, our data will be compatible with every single column that we have. So with that said, let's hop over into Atom. So once I've opened up my Atom, I'm simply going to save this as well. I'll save this as l5.sql. Always remember the file extension is very important. And I'm going to create a very simple script to alter our employees table so that we can actually add in that email column. So I'll simply start off with an alter statement, alter table, and the table that I want to alter is my employees table. So again, you could have this in lower caps if you wanted to. For consistency's sake, let's actually do just that. So employees. And now what I want to do is call add. And what do I want to add? I want to add a new column in. So the column I want to add is going to be email. And then I have to provide the specifications or the data type, in this case, varchar. And this is going to have 100 characters maybe, just to be safe, and this will have a not null constraint, and that's going to be it. So I'm simply going to copy this over now, head back over into my SQL environment, make sure that I'm hovering over hr-db, and then under my SQL tab, I'll simply just paste what I have. Let's dismiss this, and now if I go and open up my employees table under columns, you'll notice I have a new field that's been added, and that is for my email. Now, with all of the admin out of the way, we can actually start scripting our data that needs to be imported into our database. So let's head back over to Atom. Now back in Atom, I can actually remove all of this because I no longer need this code. Or you could just keep this. This is entirely up to you. However, in order to start importing my data, I need to start off with the departments table, because keep in mind, my department table has primary keys associated with the employees table, where those exact same primary keys are foreign keys in my employees table. So I'm going to start off with my departments table. So I'll say insert into departments, and then I'll open up a set of parentheses over here and start to specify the columns that I'm targeting. The first one is going to be department code. And if you remember correctly, my department code is actually stored as a varchar and not an integer. So city is going to be my next column. And then lastly, we'll have department name. Great. Now we want to insert the values. So I'll specify the values keyword. And then on a new line, this is where I'll start to insert my records. So in the first instance, I'm going to have a department code of 1. This is going to be located in London. And then we'll have another department, or the department name associated with this is going to be technology. And we'll keep it at that. Next, I'm going to move on to a new line over here. And then I'll have department code number 2. Which is located in Oxford. Let's just wrap this in quotation marks, Oxford. And this might be the transportation department or transport department. And then on a new line, I'll have department number 3, which is also going to be located in Oxford. And then this department will be the marketing department. Great. So we have 2 more departments that we'd like to add. So I'll add another one over here. And this is going to be number 4. And this is going to be located in London. And then the name of this department might be the executives, or just executive department. And then we'll add one more over here, which is going to be number 5. And this 2 will be located in Oxford. So open my quotation marks, Oxford. And then the last parameter over here is going to be sales. So if we review our code now, what we essentially have is the first line that says insert into this table, into these columns. It's quite important that you get the column names correct, else you might just get an error. Then we specify the values that we want to add, and these are the values, otherwise known as records. Now it's entirely up to you. If you wanted to add a bunch of other departments, feel free to go crazy and experiment with SQL. After all, that's the point of learning. Now, before we go ahead and actually copy and paste this code, let's make sure we have 0 typos or bugs. And in fact, I do have 1 typo in this block of code, and that is over here. Instead of department name, it's supposed to be department name. So if I change that now, update it, copy this, and then head back over to my SQL environment. Make sure that you are highlighted under your HR-DB database. I'll paste this code now, hit go, and everything has successfully been added to my database. Wonderful. Now with my department records intact, I can actually go ahead and work on the final set, and that's going to be my employees data. Now heading back into Atom, we can start writing our code. So once again, I'm going to have an insert into statement over here, and I'm going to insert into my employees table. And then I need to open up the parentheses and start targeting the columns that I want to insert my data into, much like we did with our departments table. So over here, I'll have employee number, and then I'll have last name. Then I'll move on to first name. Likewise, I'll target email, that newly created column that we created in the beginning of this practical. And then I'll have department code. I'll also have job title. And then lastly, I'll have salary. And then as we expect, we'd add the values keyword over here. And then on a new line, we can start adding in our employee data. So the first one is going to be an integer of employee 1002. Then we'll have Adams as the last name. We'll also have Joe as the first name. Next, under our email, we will have jadams@jcoaches.com. This is going to be our email. And then we'll have the number 4 for department code. This needs to be a string. Why? Because in our departments table, this is also specified as a string. So that's important to keep in mind. Right. Then I'll move on to the job title. And here we'll have CEO for Mr. Adams. And then likewise, we'll add a salary over here of, let's go with 35,000. Or let's be a bit extreme and go with 80,000. Excellent. So on a new line, we'll create another record. And here we'll pass in an ID of 1056 or an employee number of 1056. We'll also have the last name as Peterson. We'll have a first name as Pamela. And then we also need to add an email address, which is going to be ppeterson@jcoaches.com. We'll also supply a department code over here, which is going to be 3. Again, this needs to be in quotation marks. And then we'll supply a job title over here, head of marketing. Excellent. And then lastly, we need to supply a salary. So let's go with something like 45,000. Now, another thing to take note of here is that you'll notice that I passed in strings over here, which will still be treated as an integer when I pass it through the database, but for consistency's sake, we'll actually change this from a string to an integer. So I'll make this 80,000 and I'll maintain this as 45,000 over here. So now we'll simply go ahead and add in 2 more records based on our HR dashboard. And that's going to be for Ashton Jacobs as well as for Jessica Bloom. Great. So let's, on a new line over here, create a new record with the initial value of employee number of 1076. This individual's last name is going to be Jacobs. The first name will be Ashton. We'll also supply an email over here of ajacobs@jcoaches.com. Wonderful. We'll also provide a department over here, or a number for this department, which is going to be 1 in this case. Then I'll provide the job title over here, and this is going to be software developer. And then lastly, we'll supply just a salary for Mr. Ashton over here. So we'll give this individual a salary of about 46,000. Excellent. And then we need to add one last record. But to save time, and since you probably gathered more or less what's going on over here, I'll simply just copy and paste an existing record from what I currently have. So on a new line, I have one more record for Jessica Bloom with her email address as well as the department code, the name of the job title, as well as the salary. And that should be it. Let's close this off, save our script, copy and paste what we already have, head back over, and under my HRDB over here, let's just minimize everything else. Under SQL, dismiss, paste this over here, run my code, and everything has been imported successfully. So we can actually go and have a look at this data to make sure everything is as we want it to be. So if I head over to my departments table, if I look under browse, we can actually see the records that were added over here. If I head over to my employees table, we also have all the data that was successfully imported over here. Now you might be asking, why did we not focus on importing any interviews data? Well, I kind of have a surprise when it comes to this specific column over here, and I'm actually going to create a challenge out of this. But before we get to that, I think it's quite important that we start working with PHP again, just to revise our understanding of how PHP works in the web client server architecture. So for all of that and more, I'll see you in the next lesson.